Initiate energy recovery subroutine.
Sensors indicate that those batteries are the source of Omega Supreme's rejuvenation.
Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan, and in today's episode, we will talk about the powerful Autobot known as Omega Supreme. Omega Supreme is a character from the Transformers universe that is known for his immense strength and size. He is one of the most formidable and respected members of the Autobot team. He is often called upon to take on the toughest challenges that the Autobots face.
Anticipation high. Vengeance good.
He is incredibly durable and can take a lot of damage before going down, making him a formidable opponent in battle. In this video, we will take a closer look at Omega Supreme's history, his abilities, and his role in the Transformers universe. So, sit back, relax, and enjoy our video on the mighty Omega Supreme. But before we get into our explanation, we have just one very small request. If you like our content, then please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks! Now, let's begin.
Result desired.
One of the largest Autobots, Omega Supreme, origins. Omegatron Supreme, sometimes known as just Omega Supreme, ranks among the biggest Autobots. He isn't much of a talker, preferring to let his gigantic physique and similarly massive weaponry do the talking. Omega is the Autobots' last line of defense, an enormous guardian robot that can instill terror and panic into the hearts of any Decepticon who dare to face him on the battlefield. Omega was one of the many Autobots that first appeared in the second season. Unlike most, though, he was given a backstory. Omega Supreme is the only remaining survivor of the famous Guardian robots, Cybertron's enormous neutral protectors. While protecting Crystal City, he bonded with the Constructicons, the Metropolis builders. However, the Constructicons were struck by Megatron's Robo Smasher and transformed into Decepticons. Omega was persuaded to leave his station to help protect another city by the now evil Constructicons, who pledged to watch after the city in his place. To Omega Supreme's dismay, they inhabited the Crystal City. After he left, he kidnapped them and attempted to revert the builders into Autobots. However, the procedure was irreversible, and the deceitful Constructicons duped Omega into an invasion by the Smasher. Omega was struck by the Robo Smasher, and it was defeated before it could successfully convert him. Omega afterwards explained that he survived but transformed. He has had nothing but hatred for the Constructicons ever since then. Omega's cold, heartless personality, which is considerably different than how he behaved before the collapse of the Crystal City, might therefore be a direct outcome of the Robo Smasher's actions. However, it is possible that he was just withdrawn into himself as a result of the anguish of betrayal and remorse. For unexplained reasons, the Constructicons left Cybertron on a spaceship sometime after all those events occurred. Omega Supreme followed them through galaxies for many millions of years until they landed on Earth and were joined by Megatron. He saw an opportunity for vengeance when the Constructicons began mining an asteroid that ended up being an organic creature's egg. Omega left the beast to its own ways, which would have ended in San Francisco being devoured. On the other hand, Optimus Prime persuaded Omega to bring the beast back its egg, which would nourish it. Omega missed out on vengeance, but he accomplished his mission. When the Autobots planned to utilize Vector Sigma to produce a new set of Decepticon fighters, they employed Omega Supreme to track the Decepticons down to Cybertron in 1985. The Autobots formed their own team to combat the new danger, the Aerial Bots, after failing to prevent the Decepticons from developing the Stunticons. As Omega Supreme fled Cybertron, he was wounded by Centurion robot cannon fire, and after successfully disembarking his crew on Earth, he detonated. Ratchet, Wheeljack, and Sparkplug Witwicky linked Omega Supreme's consciousness to the Ark's life-supporting unit while they worked to reassemble the behemoth. The conceited Aerial Bots, displeased with both the humans they defended and the Autobots, refused to assist their fellow soldiers in vanquishing the Decepticons, until their team leader, Silverbolt, demonstrated how Sparkplug was able to ignore his exhaustion and continue fixing Omega Supreme simply because he cared about his friend's well-being. Soon after, the Aerial Bots were able to be defeated by Superion by the sanctioned Bond form, Menasor, but the now repaired Omega Supreme came and assisted them in defeating the Combiner and sending the Decepticons packing. Skylynx took over his duty as space transport in Season 3. He last appeared in Season 3, escorting Autobots at Junkion to examine the Junkion's unusual behavior. Cyclonus, Scourge, and the Sweeps shot him down, dumping the Autobots upon an asteroid. Omega swiftly reversed the course of the battle after being repaired. Omega fought the Decepticons once again. When he arrived on Junkion, he was taken down by a shot from Galvatron's cannon mode, but he recovered and continued to fight the Decepticons until Blaster begged him to take him to a height to counteract the quintessent signals. Omega seldom talked, but when he did, it was generally for only 1 or 2 words. This is his decision, as he can normally talk when asked. Omega Supreme in the Transformers Energon cartoon. In the Energon cartoon, from the Unicron trilogy, Omega Supreme is voiced by Scott McNeil in English and Kenta Miyake in Japanese. Omega Supreme is a legendary Cybertronian who fought and vanquished Unicron on his own in Cybertron's distant past. He is a strong Autobot Guardian and a member of the Guardians of Cybertron who works under the direction of the Omega Sentinel. He thinks that the relentless Resolution cannot be defeated and will not refuse to face even the most formidable adversary. He's made up of Omega Battleship, Omega, a little robot that transforms into a larger head for their combined robot mode, and Omega Train. His 2 vehicle components can also convert into the powerful Omega Force gun and the Omega Crusher weapon platforms. Moreover, the 2 vehicles could unite to form the Omega Battle Train, a unique combined vehicle mode. Energon Omega Supreme was initially intended to be part rocket, like the Generation 1 figure, but it was determined that a battleship would be nicer, as per Aaron Archer, who was present at the BotCon Hasbro panel in 2005. Some enthusiasts call his combo and transformations symmetrical docking, a reference to Chow Ryu Jin's combo. Omega Supreme has spent thousands of years in hibernation under the planet's surface. When Primus led Dr. Jones to his spot and imbued him with his legendary spark of combination, he was awakened. This enabled Omega Supreme to assist the Autobots in their fight against Unicron and the Decepticons, where he would join forces with Optimus Prime to create the mighty Optimus Supreme. Afterward, when Bruticus Maximus and Constructicon Maximus fought Superion Maximus again, Omega used his lightning power to summon Constructicon Maximus to him, telling Superion that this one was his.
Omega Supreme.
Omega Supreme in Transformers Animated 2007. The bot that came to be renowned as Omega Supreme was a member of Project Omega, an Autobot endeavor established as one of the several attempts to battle the Decepticons in the Great War. This enormous Autobot was created as a mass destruction weapon to crush the Decepticons and provide the Autobots with the victory that they solely desired throughout the conflict. His activating codes were subsequently provided to Autobot operative RC once his body was built, but she was caught by bounty hunter Lockdown, who was under instructions from Megatron to obtain that information. However, at RC's request, Autobot Medibot Ratchet erased her memory with an EMP generator to prevent the knowledge from coming into the clutches of the Decepticons. Her body was then brought to the Autobot facility, where Ratchet conducted open processor surgery to extract the information, but the activating codes were transmitted into Ratchet's mind in the process. The Autobots then brought Ratchet before Omega Supreme. They informed him of the purpose of the huge Autobots, as well as Ratchet's role as his tutor. Despite his disinclination to use Omega Supreme as a weapon, Ratchet embraced his role as a teacher and assisted Omega Supreme in the fight. Omega Supreme was solely responsible for the Decepticons' defeat on Cybertron and their expulsion from the planet. However, he suffered significant damage as a consequence, and in order to preserve him, Ratchet ordered him to return to his ship form, after which he placed Omega in a modified stasis slumber while attempting to repair and awaken him one day. Omega Supreme has since become a tiny spacecraft in the Autobot Galactic Link Repair Fleet. This spacecraft, which had a primitive AI, was never observed transforming, and its real nature was rarely discussed. Its crew discovered the lost fabled Allspark while working in a distant area of Autobot-controlled space, and was almost finally assaulted by the Decepticon ship. The Autobots escaped only by evacuating from a space bridge link, after which their spacecraft crashed on Earth. Ratchet was able to resuscitate his old comrade through an open spark treatment, using 4 Allspark fragments, and heavily relying on the key. Omega was originally agitated and perplexed, informing Ratchet that he was encircled by Decepticons and did not seem to think that he'd survived, probably the events of his demise. He quickly regained his senses. but he was extremely sluggish and hesitant after being away for 2 million star cycles, and he required Ratchet's forceful prodding to move. When he eventually got himself aloft, he was both surprised and relieved to be alive again. Omega Supreme was transformed to the same region where Megatron and Starscream had been last seen floating hopelessly away after the fight on the space bridge. Megatron discovered that the huge Autobot was offline, and Starscream pled for leniency, stating that Megatron was the only one Omega Supreme sought, and swiftly combated Starscream to stop speaking. Megatron invaded Omega Supreme, only to be immediately defeated by his internal defenses. Starscream attempted to sneak in through another route, but was also apprehended. Omega Supreme chose to use Fatal Force after scanning the two. Megatron, on the other hand, had different ideas. He maintained that he meant no damage to the mighty and all-powerful Omega Supreme. This clearly didn't really make any sense in Omega Supreme's rudimentary processor, so Megatron swiftly expanded. He handed himself and an obstinate Starscream over to Omega. Omega Supreme tried to transwarp to Cybertron, but ran out of power. They wound up in a meteorite belt, teeming with asteroid monster creatures. Megatron then hotwired the giant Autobot using his removed stasis cuffs, which was quite an accomplishment considering that he had to do it while listening to Starscream complain. He subsequently transwarped onto Earth and attempted to exterminate the Autobots, who had given him so much difficulty using the might of Omega Supreme. However, with the assistance of Ratchet, Prowl, and Optimus, Omega Supreme was temporarily freed, at least for about 20 seconds. Starscream then ended up taking over Omega Supreme's faulty CPU and tried to transwarp onto Cybertron at the behest of his new victim, Megatron. He was, well, almost successful. He would have made it if it hadn't been for the fast thinking of Bulkhead and Bumblebee, who hurled a plasma dynamic thruster at Omega Supreme. Nevertheless, after circling Cybertron for enough to yell a victorious yes, Starscream, with his massive super robot, started to warp about space in an erratic manner. Omega Supreme was later discovered in the sky above Cybertron, where Lugnut had removed the plasmic dynamic thruster, causing them to no longer warp about at random. The Decepticons required the activating codes to activate Omega Supreme in order to seize control of him. Shockwave accepted the task and approached Omega's previous tutor, Ratchet. Shockwave opted to retrieve the codes from the actual source, RC. Shockwave grabbed RC, and the other Decepticons fled, just as Sentinel Magnus instructed Omega Supreme to begin firing. After Bulkhead and Bumblebee defeated Shockwave, Ratchet, Sari, and RC bring him back online on the moon. They make their way back to Earth, wherein Omega's clones are spreading havoc. Omega destroys one clone before being defeated by another. This clone eventually self-destructed as part of Starscream's plan to kill the Autobots and Megatron. Prowl and Jazz, on the other hand, summoned shards of the Allspark and prevented the clone from wrecking Detroit at the expense of Prowl's life. After defeating Megatron, Optimus is jailed, along with Shockwave and Lugnut, and Omega Supreme returns everyone to Cybertron. The Autobot population applauds Optimus Prime and the team, and as Omega Supreme morphs, they applaud even louder, signaling the end of the battle. Omega Supreme's surprising storyline in the comic series. In the Marvel Comics continuity, the Autobots from Earth created Omega Supreme to defend the Ark when they were abroad. With Omega operational, the Autobots could assault the Decepticons with force. Megatron took advantage of the situation right away, commanding Buzzsaw, Frenzy, Laserbeak, Rumble, Skywarp, Starscream, and Thundercracker to all strike the Ark. They didn't receive the message about the Autobots' upgraded protective barrier, and Omega Supreme quickly defeated them all but Laserbeak, who was able to escape with an injured Megatron straight to the Decepticons. Though Omega Supreme remained to protect the Ark, he didn't really appear to be as massive as he once was. He'd be able to squeeze into the Ark in no time. After Trypticon struck, he carpeted the Ark's entrance with Sonic Scrambler explosives, incapacitating Omega and the remaining Autobots inside. Omega was therefore unable to face the behemoth. Later, when Grimlock and Blaster were slated to fight for Autobot dominance on the moon, Omega Supreme served as a type of master of ceremonies. He was relatively tiny at this point. The narrator seems to really think that this was absolutely unacceptable when Buzzsaw blasted Omega Supreme, as Omega really appeared to be knocked over during the Underbase crisis. He didn't survive long enough to be ashamed, since the Underbase-powered Starscream murdered him soon after. He was spotted in pieces in Ratchet's repair facility, but he was never seen to be operational again. In the Marvel UK Comics continuity, during the initial Galvatron confrontation, the Autobots openly discussed unleashing Omega Supreme upon the Decepticons, and then they never did, despite the fact that it was a fantastic idea and they were aware of the potential. In the Dreamswave comic continuity, Jetfire and Omega Supreme were dispatched to find the Ark. Sometime after its departure, they were eventually buried beneath Antarctica on Earth. Jetfire revived Omega Supreme remotely millions of years after in an attempt to beat Sunstorm. Sunstorm had managed to blur Omega Supreme's eyesight, despite his initial success. When Omega Supreme lowered his visor to look, Sunstorm blasted him in the face with a blast of solar radiation, knocking him offline instantaneously. He recovered quickly, but Sunstorm had fled. Omega subsequently assisted the Autobots in the construction of Autobot City. In the Transformers vs. G.I. Joe continuity, Omega Supreme, the powerful Autobot, played a crucial role in Optimus Prime's banishment from Cybertron. Along with Prime, Omega Supreme fled to Earth and disguised himself as Highway Omega, only revealing himself when several G.I. Joes were ambushed by Cobra and the Decepticons. Omega Supreme was able to defeat the attackers and announced that he had received the signal to return to Cybertron and fight for his homeworld. He transformed into his rocket form and returned to Cybertron, taking the G.I. Joes with him. During his journey back to Cybertron, Omega Supreme collided with Astro Train in space, but was able to defeat him. Upon landing on Cybertron, Omega Supreme joined the United Autobot Joe attack against the Decepticons. In the IDW Comics continuity, Omega Supreme is primarily absent from the conflict between the Decepticons and the Autobots. He lives in solitude, in a carefully shielded fake asteroid inside the Mutagath Nebula, predating the concept of divisions and having witnessed 2 primes. Despite being officially affiliated with the Autobots, he stays out of the fight, for fears of intensifying it owing to the weaponry he wields. Instead, he serves as a resource for primes in moments of need. He did, however, join Megatron, Optimus Prime, and Trypticon in the Autobot against Decepticon struggle to halt Thunderwing. Omega Supreme is among the few Transformers that remember the first arc. He regularly disagreed with the imperialist Nova Prime, who believed Cybertron's fate rested in the conquering of other worlds, since he believed the Transformer species should exercise patient internal development and intellectual contemplation. Following the evacuation of the Ark and the disappearance of the Nova Prime, Omega Supreme uncovered a monstrous invention of theirs, Monstructor. He imprisoned the synthesis in a dimensionally misaligned jail to keep it from destroying Cybertron and worsening the fight. Hundreds of years later, Optimus Prime sought his counsel. When the two were conversing, Monstructor, who had escaped from captivity, attacked Omega Supreme, revealing the facts about himself and the Monstructor to Optimus Prime. Despite conquering the Gestalt, Optimus Prime reprimanded Omega Supreme for trying to act as a god by merely shutting them away. Because he was easily vanquished by a lone Gestalt, this form of Omega would either be significantly weaker than the rest, or the Gestalts were substantially more robust in this timeline. However, Omega seemed to think the latter. Like the other Autobot strongholds, Omega Supreme's covert headquarters was invaded by the Decepticon army. When the Trion fell, he got Hot Rod's distress signal, and a curiously more giant Omega Supreme than he had previously been seen as came in just in time to fend off the swarm. Omega flew the Autobot squad to Earth, just in time to meet the Decepticons' fragmented troops. Omega Supreme jumped into the fray, taking the Devastator out of town. On Ellis Island, Devastator lamented the fact that he was unable to be beaten. Omega Supreme's strength was depleted, and he retreated into hiding with the rest of the Autobots after the fight for New York. He was disguised as a powerful rocket and tank in an unobstructed canyon. Clearly, hiding is not amongst his strong suits. He refuses to aid Hot Rod and the Autobot gang in their getaway from Earth. That apparently included not assisting when they were ambushed by a Decepticon squad. Bumblebee recognized that he would need some assistance disguising himself and had him go into a small cave in which he could scarcely move.
We do now!
Omega's internal shielding is exposed, but he still functions.
Marvelous appearance of Omega Supreme in other media. During the War of Autobot City, Omega Supreme was unable to assist the city, as he was occupied with protecting Autobot headquarters with the help of Superion and Defensor from a massive attack by the Decepticon combiner teams Menasor and Bruticus. In the 2010 video game, Transformers War for Cybertron, Omega Supreme is both among the most deadly Autobots and also the key to Cybertron's core. Omega Supreme chased Megatron in his battleship state and confronted him as a nucleon shock cannon base in Decepticon Chapter 4. On the other hand, Megatron blasted him from the air and in an underground cavern. Omega was ultimately vanquished. Optimus Prime liberated Omega from Megatron's captivity in Autobot Chapter 3 and unlocked the Omega Gate, allowing Optimus to defend Cybertron.
Discovery! Megatron! Help us! Megatron!
marvelous verdict. In conclusion, Omega Supreme is a powerful and respected member of the Autobot team. Known for his immense strength and size, he played an essential role in helping Optimus Prime and later joined the United Autobot Joe attack on the Decepticons. He later played a crucial role in protecting Autobot headquarters during the War of Autobot City. Omega Supreme is a formidable opponent in battle and a valuable asset to the Autobot team. Thank you so much for watching our video today on Omega Supreme. We certainly hope you learned something about this iconic character. Let us know about your thoughts on Omega Supreme in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed today's content, then don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, have a good one and be safe.
Decepticons located.